The year is 1945. The Pacific Ocean, a vast expanse of islands, each a bloody stepping stone towards an unimaginable final invasion. On one such island, Okinawa, the stakes are almost beyond comprehension. Thousands upon thousands of lives hang in the balance, poised on the edge of a tactical abyss. Our story begins in a desolate landscape, scarred by relentless war. A shell crater, offering a meager sanctuary from the constant threat of enemy fire. Inside, a lone figure, a young Marine scout, hunches, his eyes scanning the horizon. Just a few hundred yards ahead, a formidable enemy force digs in, their defensive positions solidifying with every passing minute. Their artillery, lethal and precise, is zeroed in on every potential approach. This scout's mission is, in theory, straightforward. Penetrate enemy lines, identify and map their artillery. In practice, it's a death sentence. To cross that open ground in broad daylight, under the unforgiving equatorial sun, against an enemy known for its ruthless efficiency, is an act of sheer madness. Every other scout attempting similar daylight patrols in the past week has vanished or been cut down. The casualty rate for such missions is a horrifying 68%. Command has already written this one off as impossible. But this young Marine carries a secret. Tucked away in his pack is not standard issue gear, but a small, unassuming tin container. Inside, a strange paste, hand-mixed 3 nights ago in the rubble of a bombed-out schoolhouse. It's a concoction that defies every official regulation, every principle of military camouflage taught by the Corps. His commanding officer explicitly forbade it. Military manuals would call it a violation of the laws of war.
What he doesn't know, crouched there, about to embark on a journey that could either save thousands or cost him his life, is that this illicit creation will not only revolutionize military reconnaissance, but it will rewrite the very rules of engagement. This crude mixture, born of desperation and defiance, will become the precursor to what every special operations unit on Earth, from the most elite Navy SEALs to the legendary British SAS, will eventually use. It will remain a classified secret for nearly 2 decades, its true impact whispered only amongst those who survived because of it. Right now, though, he's just a 22-year-old college dropout with a knack for chemistry and a burning desire not to die. He's about to commit what the Marine Corps considers an act of war crime, all to solve an impossible problem that is costing American lives by the hundreds. The Pacific War has a fatal flaw, a tactical conundrum that no expert, no strategist, no amount of conventional wisdom has been able to solve, and it's bleeding American forces dry. How do you gather critical intelligence on an entrenched, unseen enemy when they can spot you from a mile away? How do you move in plain sight yet remain invisible? The answer, he believed, lay not in following the rules, but in breaking them entirely. And the shocking truth of his discovery will challenge everything you thought you knew about problem-solving, innovation, and the true cost of conventional thinking. Stay with me, because this story is more than just a tale of wartime ingenuity. It's a profound lesson in how the most radical solutions often emerge from the least expected places, driven by a desperate courage to defy the impossible. Since the island-hopping campaign began its relentless push across the Pacific in 1943, American forces faced a tactical nightmare. European battlefields offered forests and varied terrain where traditional camouflage, with its greens and browns, could effectively blend soldiers into the environment. But the Pacific? It was a kaleidoscope of brutal, unforgiving colors. Vivid red volcanic earth, stark white coral sand, jagged black lava flows, the vibrant, almost alien yellow-green of tropical vegetation, all bathed under an intense equatorial sun that carved harsh shadows and amplified every contrast. Standard issue Marine Corps camouflage, the olive drab uniforms, the regulation green and brown face paint, might as well have been a neon sign advertising target practice. Against the dynamic backdrop of the Pacific, it made soldiers stand out with alarming clarity. Attempts to adapt were futile. Lighter uniforms, sand-colored fabric, even white for coral terrain, failed spectacularly. They might work in one microenvironment, but betrayed the wearer everywhere else. Mixed patterns, designed by experts, often created an artificial, almost pixelated appearance that screamed human presence to the trained eye. The official solution proposed by military strategists was to send reconnaissance patrols at night. But the Japanese defenders, masters of nocturnal warfare, turned the darkness into their greatest weapon. They established interlocking fields of fire, maintained eerie noise discipline, and deployed patient listening posts that could detect the slightest American movement in the dark. The result? Night reconnaissance missions on islands like Peleliu and Iwo Jima produced horrific casualty rates, sometimes reaching 83% in the first week. Darkness, it turned out, was no cover, but a deadly trap. The military's camouflage experts, schooled at institutions like Fort Benning, insisted the problem lay with fabric patterns and uniform design. They tirelessly tested dozens of variations, convinced that the perfect blend of colors and shapes would provide the answer. But time and again, in the crucible of combat, every single one failed. The consensus among these seasoned professionals became grimly clear. Effective daylight reconnaissance in the Pacific was not just difficult, it was tactically impossible. The human eye, they argued, was simply too adept at detecting movement and contrast. Their recommendation? More advanced night vision equipment and even more aggressive nighttime tactics, a strategy that had already proven devastatingly costly. The stakes escalated dramatically as American forces closed in on the Japanese home islands. Okinawa was the final, critical stepping stone before the unthinkable, an invasion of mainland Japan. The Japanese High Command had months, years even, to fortify positions, dig elaborate tunnel systems, and pre-register artillery on every single approach route. Without precise, up-to-the-minute intelligence, American casualties in the projected invasion were estimated to exceed a staggering 1 million lives. By April 1945, the situation was desperate. Marine Division commanders were demanding solutions, any solutions. The official response from the Quartermaster Corps, the branch responsible for supplies, was a bureaucratic shrug. New camouflage uniforms were in development, slated for field testing in 6 to 8 months, long after the war's outcome would be decided, or more likely, after countless more lives were needlessly lost.
Amidst this backdrop of conventional failure and desperate urgency stood a young Marine named William. He hadn't planned on being a soldier, let alone a revolutionary. In 1942, he was a 19-year-old university sophomore, a chemistry major with unremarkable grades and no clear direction. His professors, while acknowledging his intellectual curiosity, often noted his lack of discipline. He spent more time in his dorm room tinkering with homemade photographic developers than he did attending lectures. When Pearl Harbor shattered the nation's peace, William, like millions of young men, enlisted. The Marine Corps cared little for his chemistry background. They needed riflemen. He endured the grueling boot camp, proved an apt marksman, and was shipped to the Pacific in early 1943. He saw combat on Guadalcanal, distinguishing himself not through overt heroics, but through an unusual, almost instinctive talent. He was exceptionally good at not being seen. While other Marines bunched up, moved carelessly, and inadvertently drew enemy fire, William seemed to possess an innate understanding of the terrain. He knew precisely when to move during enemy reloads, how to melt into the background with subtle shifts. His squad leader quickly took notice. By 1944, William was pulled into reconnaissance work, where his unusual talent flourished. But his success was tinged with bitter frustration. The official camouflage simply didn't work. He watched friends die, silhouetted against terrain that, by all rights, should have hidden them. He knew there had to be a better way.
The moment of profound insight arrived in March 1945 during a brief respite on Okinawa. William was observing an elderly Okinawan woman working in a field, a seemingly mundane scene. But something about her struck him as profoundly odd. Despite wearing brightly colored traditional clothing, she was surprisingly difficult to track visually as she moved and paused. It wasn't about being dark or dull or even patterned. He realized it was because her clothing, while vibrant, seemed to perfectly match the color temperature and intensity of the surrounding environment, the specific way the tropical sunlight interacted with the landscape. It wasn't about being invisible through darkness, it was about being invisible through light itself. This wasn't just a different color, it was a different kind of concealment. A revolutionary idea began to form in his mind, echoing a forgotten principle from his college chemistry courses, metamerism. the phenomenon where colors can appear identical under certain lighting conditions, even if they're composed of entirely different pigments. If he could create a compound that matched the spectral reflectance of Okinawan terrain under that intense tropical sunlight, he might achieve something no military camouflage had ever accomplished: true visual integration with the environment, not just blending, but effectively dissolving into the ambient light. Driven by this revelation, William transformed a section of a destroyed schoolhouse located 3 miles behind the front lines into his clandestine laboratory. He became a scavenger, begging, borrowing, and even outright liberating art supplies from the rebel: watercolors, pastels, raw clays. His fellow Marines thought he was losing his mind, indulging in bizarre art projects when he should be preparing for combat. His sergeant gruffly ordered him to stop wasting time. But William was relentless. He began mixing compounds, testing them against different backgrounds, meticulously observing how they looked under direct sunlight versus the deep shade of palm fronds. His equipment was rudimentary at best: stolen watercolors, local Okinawan clay, charcoal scraped from burned-out buildings, rice powder pilfered from abandoned supplies, and even animal fat rendered down from his own rations. He had no sophisticated measuring instruments, only his remarkably discerning eyes and a crude homemade color wheel fashioned from a piece of cardboard. The Marine Corps camouflage regulations were crystal clear and explicitly strict. Only approved face paints were to be used: a standard 2-color compact, olive drab and loam brown. These regulations weren't arbitrary, they existed for critical reasons. In World War I, some desperate soldiers experimented with unauthorized camouflage containing toxic compounds, leading to skin severe irritations or worse. Others unwittingly used materials that reflected infrared light, making them glaringly visible to enemy night vision equipment. The rules were unambiguous. Unauthorized camouflage materials constituted a violation of Article 92 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, a court-martial offense. William didn't care. He had watched too many friends die. His first attempts at his unique concoction failed spectacularly. A mixture heavy on white clay made him look like a ghostly apparition. A formula based on red clay worked well against bare soil, but made him stand out like a beacon against the lush vegetation. He quickly understood the flaw in his approach. He was still trying to match specific colors. The true breakthrough came when he pivoted to matching light values and color temperature. On April 19, 1945, the pieces clicked into place. He created a base using rice powder, mixed it with rendered fat, then meticulously added precise, small amounts of red Okinawan clay, charcoal, and a vibrant yellow pigment extracted from local flowers. The resulting paste was a strange, almost unsettling beige-gray-pink color. In the dim light of the schoolhouse, it looked utterly wrong, optically confusing. But when he ventured outside to test it, applying it in broken, disruptive patterns to his face, neck, and hands, it seemed to visually vibrate. Neither truly light nor dark, neither overtly warm nor cool. It was, as he instinctively knew, optically confusing. He tested it on himself, then had another Marine observe him from 200 yards across an open field. The report that came back was startling. William was detectable when moving, but when he froze in position, he seemed to blur into the background, even under the harsh direct sunlight. The effect was so disorienting that the observer struggled to maintain focus on his form. William presented his creation to his platoon sergeant, a seasoned staff sergeant named Caruso. Caruso's reaction was immediate and emphatic. "That is absolutely illegal. You cannot use unauthorized materials on your face. What if it's toxic? What if you get captured and the Japs think we're using chemical weapons? This is court-martial material, William. Throw it away." But Caruso didn't order him to destroy it. And when William, just 3 days later, volunteered for the almost certainly suicidal reconnaissance mission scheduled for April 22nd, Staff Sergeant Caruso looked the other way as William carefully packed the small illicit tin container into his gear. The regulations were clear, but the desperation of war and the chance of a breakthrough quietly trumped them. The afternoon of April 22, 1945, found William once again in that shell crater, preparing for the impossible. At 1400 hours, he meticulously applied the paste. It felt greasy, smelled faintly of rancid fat and earth. He had no mirror, working by touch, following the broken, feature-disrupting patterns he had practiced. At 1415 hours, he began his approach. His technique was known as glacial movement, an agonizingly slow advance, sometimes as little as 6 inches per minute, designed to move below the threshold of human eye perception. It demanded extraordinary muscle control and almost inhuman patience. But William possessed a crucial advantage no previous scout had. When he froze, he effectively disappeared. He covered the first 100 yards in 90 minutes. Japanese soldiers were visible ahead, digging trenches, moving supplies, talking. They weren't on high alert. This was their supposed rear area, and no American scout had ever penetrated this far in daylight. William moved only during moments of distraction, when trucks rumbled past, when officers shouted orders, when work parties changed shifts. At one heart-stopping moment, a Japanese soldier walked within 15 feet of his position. William froze, pressed against a slight rise in the ground, his face turned towards the soil. The soldier stopped, lit a cigarette, stood there for 3 interminable minutes. William didn't dare breathe. The soldier eventually moved on, never once seeing the American scout lying in plain sight.
William reached the Japanese artillery positions at 17:30 hours. For 40 minutes, he remained utterly still, memorizing locations, counting guns, noting ammunition dumps. He meticulously sketched everything in a small, waterproof notebook, then began the even more perilous journey back. He returned to American lines at 20:05 hours, under the cover of darkness. He had spent 7 hours in no man's land, 3 of them in broad daylight, deep within enemy-controlled territory. He delivered his intelligence to the S2 intelligence section. The coordinates were perfect. The artillery positions were exactly where William had reported. But when his commanding officer, a Major Fowler, learned about the unauthorized camouflage, the response was explosive. A meeting was immediately called for the next morning, April 23, 1945, at the division command post. Present were Major Fowler, the division intelligence officer, a Lieutenant Colonel Becker, the division quartermaster, a Captain Stevens, and 3 camouflage experts who had just arrived from the States. Captain Stevens, the quartermaster, was absolutely furious. This is a clear violation of regulations. Sergeant William used unauthorized materials that have not been tested for toxicity, for enemy detectability, for any safety standard. He could have been using materials that reflect infrared light. He could have poisoned himself. This sets a dangerous precedent. The camouflage experts readily agreed. A Captain Morrison, trained at the prestigious Fort Benning Camouflage School, was dismissive. "I've reviewed the formula. It's primitive chemistry with no scientific basis. Any effectiveness was pure luck or simply due to Williams' fieldcraft, not the paint. Our approved camouflage compounds are developed by experts with proper testing protocols." The room erupted when Lieutenant Colonel Becker dared to suggest testing Williams' formula. Captain Morrison stood, pointing directly at William. "You're going to trust the war to some college dropout playing with mud? We have trained specialists, approved materials, established procedures. This is exactly the kind of cowboy nonsense that gets men killed." Major Fowler was caught in an impossible bind, torn between regulations and results. The intelligence William provided had already been used to direct a successful artillery strike, destroying 16 Japanese guns. But officially sanctioning unauthorized camouflage could open him up to charges of dereliction of duty. The debate raged for 90 minutes, an echo chamber of conventional wisdom clashing with undeniable battlefield success. Then the division commander, a Major General Shepard, entered the room. Shepard had a reputation as a maverick, a leader who valued results over rigid adherence to procedure. He listened to both sides for 10 minutes, his expression unreadable. Then he made his decision. "We're going to test it properly. Captain Morrison, you will design a controlled test using both standard camouflage and Sergeant Williams' formula. We'll use trained observers, measured distances, timed observations. If Williams' paint works, we use it. If it doesn't, he faces court-martial for violating regulations. We'll have results in 48 hours. The stage was set for an experiment that would redefine the meaning of invisibility. But before we reveal the shocking outcome of that test and how this seemingly illegal experiment ultimately saved thousands of lives, I want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor for making this deep dive into unconventional innovation possible. If you're enjoying this story of rule-breaking ingenuity, consider hitting that like button, subscribing to our channel, and ringing the notification bell so you don't miss our next compelling narrative. Your support helps us bring these incredible stories of human triumph and insight to a wider audience. The controlled test, orchestrated by the skeptical Captain Morrison, took place on April 25, 1945, at a range facility strategically located behind American lines. The protocol was designed to be rigorous, objective, and leave no room for doubt or subjectivity. 12 seasoned Marine observers, all highly trained scouts, were positioned at varying distances, from a close 100 yards to a challenging 500 yards. The test subjects would move across typical Okinawan terrain: red clay, patches of burned vegetation, jagged coral outcroppings, all under the harsh, unyielding conditions of full daylight. 4 Marines were selected as test subjects. 2 were outfitted in standard Marine Corps olive drab uniforms and applied regulation face paint. The other 2 used Williams' formula, applied meticulously in the broken, disruptive patterns he had developed. Crucially, the observers were kept completely blind. They had no idea which subjects were using which camouflage. This was a purely empirical examination of effectiveness. The results, now declassified and documented in official Marine Corps records, were nothing short of dramatic. At 100 yards, all 4 subjects were detected within an average of 30 seconds when they were moving. This was expected. No camouflage could render a moving human entirely invisible at that range. But when the subjects froze in position, the difference was stark, almost unbelievable. The Marines wearing standard camouflage were identified by observers within an average of just 12 seconds. In stark contrast, the subjects wearing Williams' camouflage took an average of 47 seconds to identify. And, astonishingly, 3 of the 12 trained observers failed to identify them at all within the 2-minute test window. They were simply gone. At 300 yards, the critical distance for most reconnaissance work, where the human eye's ability to discern detail rapidly diminishes, the results were even more striking. Standard camouflage subjects, when stationary, were identified in an average of 8 seconds. Williams' camouflage subjects, however, took an average of 2 minutes and 18 seconds to identify. And an incredible 5 out of the 12 observers never identified them at all. They simply couldn't resolve the camouflaged Marines against the background. Captain Morrison, the expert who had been so dismissive just days earlier, was visibly stunned. He immediately requested additional extended tests. Over the next 3 days, Williams' formula was put through the ringer, tested under different lighting conditions: morning haze, midday glare, late afternoon shadows, against various backgrounds and with different application patterns. The results remained consistently clear. Williams' formula provided a 3- to 4-fold improvement in concealment effectiveness compared to standard Marine Corps camouflage. The military chemists were then tasked with analyzing the composition. What William had accidentally instinctively created was a paint that matched not just the color, but the light reflectance properties of Okinawan terrain. The rice powder base diffused light rather than reflecting it sharply, eliminating glare and softening the human outline. The carefully mixed pigments created a color that appeared subtly different depending on the viewing angle and ambient light conditions, a prime example of the metamerism principle William had recalled from his chemistry courses. And the broken, irregular application pattern effectively disrupted facial recognition, breaking up the easily identifiable human form. The overall effect was what modern camouflage experts now call visual noise. The eye could detect something was there, but it struggled, often failed, to resolve it into a recognizable human shape. It was a psychological trick, a manipulation of perception itself. On April 30th, 1945, just 8 days after Williams' audacious mission and the subsequent heated debate, Major General Shepard authorized the immediate production and distribution of Williams' formula to all reconnaissance units. The Quartermaster Corps, the very department that had dismissed it as primitive chemistry, was ordered to analyze the formula and mass-produce it. William was promoted to staff sergeant and assigned the vital task of training other scouts in the precise, effective application techniques. The rule breaker had become the teacher, and his illegal experiment was now official doctrine. The combat results were immediate and dramatic, a stark validation of unconventional thinking. Before the introduction of Williams' camouflage, Marine reconnaissance patrols on Okinawa suffered a crushing 68% casualty rate. After its widespread introduction, that casualty rate plummeted to 23%, a reduction of 45 percentage points. In the 6 weeks between May 1st and June 15, 1945, Marine reconnaissance units equipped with the new camouflage successfully completed 147 daylight missions that would have been deemed utterly impossible before. The intelligence gathered from these once suicidal forays led directly to the destruction of over 300 Japanese artillery positions. It is estimated that these operations alone saved approximately 2,000 American lives. The silent ghosts of Okinawa were turning the tide. The enemy quickly took notice, their intelligence reports betraying a new, unsettling fear. A captured Japanese intelligence report from May 1945, discovered after the war's end, described American scouts as ghosts who appear from nowhere, an almost supernatural threat. A Japanese artillery officer, Captain Takeshi Yamamoto, wrote in his diary on May 18, 1945,
American scouts are now operating in daylight within our positions. Our sentries see nothing until it is too late. This new technique is more frightening than their artillery. The fear was palpable. How do you fight an enemy you cannot see, an enemy that seems to simply materialize from the very landscape itself? On June 3, 1945, a mission vividly demonstrated the formula's full, terrifying potential. Staff Sergeant William and a partner, Corporal Chen, were tasked with penetrating deep into Japanese lines near the heavily fortified Shuri Castle, a critical objective, to verify intelligence reports of a hidden command bunker. They applied the camouflage at dawn, a ritual that was fast becoming routine, and began their approach at 0600 hours.
Over the next 8 hours, they crossed a staggering 12,200 yards, nearly 7 miles, of fiercely contested terrain. They passed within 50 yards of Japanese positions multiple times, so close they could hear the murmur of voices, the clink of equipment, the mundane sounds of an enemy unaware of their presence. They successfully located the bunker, meticulously counted personnel, and positively identified it as a crucial battalion headquarters. They returned with intelligence that led to a direct artillery strike, resulting in the elimination of the Japanese battalion commander and his entire staff. Corporal Chen, reflecting on the experience years later, vividly described the surreal nature of their mission. "We were in broad daylight, sometimes within speaking distance of Japanese soldiers. They looked right at us and saw nothing. It was like being invisible. Without that paint, we'd have been dead in the first 100 yards. Their lives and countless others were saved by a smudge of forbidden mud." The formula was rapidly refined and standardized by the Quartermaster Corps. It was produced in compact 2-ounce tins, complete with clear instructions for application, becoming a standard issue item for Marine reconnaissance units throughout the Pacific by July 1945. Plans were even laid to distribute it to all infantry units in preparation for the daunting invasion of mainland Japan. That invasion thankfully never came. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. But Williams' camouflage had already fundamentally altered military reconnaissance forever. It had proven that the impossible was in fact achievable. Before we delve into how this illegal experiment became the standard issue for modern special forces globally, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button, give us a like if you're finding this story compelling, and enable notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the hidden histories of innovation.
The numbers undeniably tell the story. Between May 1st and August 15, 1945, Williams' camouflage formula was used in 284 reconnaissance missions across Okinawa and the surrounding islands. The casualty rates for these missions averaged a remarkable 21%, a drastic improvement when compared to the 68% casualty rate for missions using standard camouflage. The intelligence gleaned from these almost invisible patrols led to the destruction of over 800 enemy positions and is estimated to have saved upwards of 3,500 American lives in the final brutal months of the war. After the war, the formula's extraordinary effectiveness ensured its continued classification. The U.S. military, recognizing its unparalleled value, continued to refine it, testing it in a myriad of environments: the unforgiving Korean mountains, the dense Vietnamese jungles, the vast open deserts of the Middle East. The basic principle William had discovered, matching light reflectance properties rather than just superficial color, became the bedrock of modern camouflage science. It was a paradigm shift from simply blending in to actively manipulating visual perception. In 1963, the formula was finally declassified and subsequently published in military journals, revealing its secrets to the world. By then, it had evolved into an entire family of sophisticated camouflage compounds, each meticulously optimized for different terrains and lighting conditions. The British SAS, renowned for their stealth operations, adopted similar formulations in the 1960s. Israeli special forces developed their own versions for desert operations. Even Soviet Spetsnaz units created a variant tailored for Arctic conditions. Today, the modern descendants of Williams' original, rudimentary formula are utilized by virtually every special operations unit across the globe. The highly effective face paints used by Navy SEALs, the advanced camouflage creams favored by the British SAS, the specialized concealment compounds of Delta Force, all trace their lineage directly back to that humble, homemade paste mixed in a bombed-out Okinawan schoolhouse in April 1945. In 1987, a dedicated Marine Corps historian finally tracked down William for an oral history project. By then, William Manchester had become a distinguished professor and an acclaimed author, far removed from the battlefields of his youth. Yet he remained remarkably reluctant to discuss his wartime innovations. When pressed about his profound contribution to military camouflage, he simply said, with characteristic humility, "I just mixed some mud and paint because I didn't want to die. I'm not a hero. The heroes are the men who used it and still didn't come home." But one of those men, a man whose life was irrevocably altered by William's defiance, disagreed vehemently. In 1989, Corporal Chen, William's partner on the perilous Shuri Castle mission, attended a Marine Corps reunion. He found William in the crowded hall, walked up to him and simply said, "Because of you, I came home. Because of you, I met my wife, raised my children, lived my life. You saved me, Bill. You saved hundreds of us." It was a testament that transcended statistics, a profound human acknowledgement of a life-saving breakthrough.
The official Marine Corps history now credits William's formula with reducing reconnaissance casualties by an astounding 66% in the final, brutal months of the Pacific War. The Quartermaster Corps estimates it directly saved between 3,000 and 5,000 American lives. Modern military historians argue the true number is undoubtedly far higher, as the intelligence gathered using this revolutionary camouflage prevented countless ambushes and devastating artillery strikes that would have claimed untold more. William Manchester never sought recognition for his audacious innovation. He consistently refused medals, politely declined interviews, and requested that his vital role remain classified long after the war had ended. When the Marine Corps finally published the full story in 1995, he was again asked why he had been so reluctant to discuss his monumental contribution. His answer, imbued with the quiet humility characteristic of his generation, perfectly encapsulated his motivations. "I wasn't trying to revolutionize anything. I was just a scared kid who didn't want to get shot. If what I did helped other scared kids come home, that's enough. That's all that matters." Today, every special operations soldier, every elite operative who applies camouflage paint before a critical mission is unknowingly utilizing principles first discovered by a 22-year-old college dropout in a bombed-out schoolhouse on Okinawa. The formula has been refined, the chemistry perfected, the application technique standardized, but the core insight remains Manchester's. True camouflage isn't merely about matching colors, it's about matching light itself. It's about manipulating perception to become functionally invisible. The lesson extends far beyond military tactics. This story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most elegant, life-saving solutions to seemingly impossible problems don't emerge from committees of experts following established procedures. They often come from unconventional thinkers, from amateurs willing to question deeply held assumptions, to experiment with unorthodox approaches, and to risk everything on an idea that by all conventional wisdom simply shouldn't work. William Manchester broke regulations, he defied experts, and he created something technically illegal that saved thousands of lives. His story reminds us that true innovation often requires a profound kind of courage, not just the courage to face enemy fire, but the courage to challenge conventional wisdom, to push past the limits of what is known, especially when the stakes are as high as human lives. The next time someone tells you something is impossible, remember the Marine sergeant who proved that you can walk past 400 enemy soldiers in broad daylight if you're willing to think differently about what it means to be invisible. Dare to question, dare to experiment, dare to defy the status quo, because you just might discover the next breakthrough that changes everything. If this story resonated with you and you appreciate tales of ingenuity, courage, and unconventional thinking, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge the way you see the world. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another deep dive into the extraordinary. Thank you for watching.